The tension in the room was palpable as Emily heard a knock on her office door.
Come in.
She glanced up when she didn't hear any footsteps and saw a slender figure with dyed blue hair and makeup. It was David, the top male singer and her only ex-boyfriend. His presence churned emotions within her.
You're still alive? I thought you had long disappeared abroad.
His harsh words seemed to unlock something within Emily. She felt a wave of nausea but kept her calm.
Don't bother looking, you're delusional.
Hurry up, I need a consultation.
David plopped down in the chair opposite her. Emily forced herself not to think about anything unnecessary.
Do you have any previous medical records? Describe your emotional symptoms.
Yes.
Emily extended her hand.
Let me see.
David looked at the nail marks in her palm as if admiring them.
You want them? I didn't bring any.
Emily stiffened and withdrew her hand.
David, don't waste my time.
Emily, who are you pretending to be?
A hint of mockery appeared on his face.
What, still haven't found your ideal person? What goes around comes around, Emily. It's time you faced some hardships.
With a loud bang, David slammed the door and left. Emily bent over, the discomfort in her stomach growing stronger. She quickly ran to the restroom, retching, but nothing came out. She collapsed on the bathroom floor, feeling utterly defeated.
What goes around comes around. Then why does it never come around to me?
As soon as Emily stepped out of the hospital, Jessica was energetically waving at her. Emily forced a smile.
Hey, Emily! Top of the honor roll for looks.
Jessica lightly punched Emily's shoulder.
Wait, why do you look so pale today?
Emily's heart skipped a beat. Before she could think of an excuse, Jessica continued.
Did you put on powder? Finally using your beauty as a weapon.
Emily smiled and nodded, getting into the car. Music played inside the car. Her internal reservoir of emotions was full, and words spilled out unconsciously.
Jessica, I ran into David today.
The music volume was turned down.
He's just the same as before, no changes.
Jessica slammed on the brakes, causing Emily's head to hit the dashboard. Emily held her head, bewildered.
Emily, who does David think he is? Breaking up with you when you needed help the most, acting like he's some kind of deity with that constant scowl. What's so good about him?
Jessica had asked Emily the same question 8 years ago. Emily murmured, her voice overlapping with the one from back then.
I don't know.
Emily hadn't been back in the country long when Jessica insisted she shouldn't rent a place. Jessica had a grand excuse.
You need the warm embrace of a sister.
But Emily understood. Jessica was scared. Scared of what? Probably everything fate had forced upon her. When Emily got home, she went straight to her room. The distress signals from her stomach to her brain were unbearable. Gritting her teeth, she found the medicine hidden in her suitcase. She swallowed it dry, without water. The torment of the previous day felt like a dream. The next day, aside from the bump on her forehead, Emily felt surprisingly energetic. When she arrived at the hospital, her schedule was fully booked again. Unfortunately, today's first patient was the same as yesterday's last. David leaned against the doorframe of the consultation room, looking indifferent. It was as if he hadn't slammed the door in anger the day before. Suddenly, a hint of anger appeared on his face.
Emily, your taste has really gone downhill since me. You're even dating someone who hits you.
Instinctively, Emily touched her forehead. He misunderstood. Then, a stack of medical records was thrown onto the desk in front of her. Emily thought it was another one of his childish pranks. But when she saw severe bipolar disorder, she was in disbelief. Reading her expression, David chuckled softly, his eyes full of mockery.
Think it's fake? I'm not that high school kid anymore, faking medical records to trick you.
After a moment of silence, Emily spoke with difficulty.
How long have you been ill?
David calmed down, his expression indifferent.
8 years.
Suddenly, Emily's mind went blank. She stared at the medical record as if trying to see through this absurd joke. David pressed his lips tightly, struggling to control his emotions. But if an illness could be controlled, it wouldn't be an illness. He suddenly stood up and came to her, bending slightly to encircle her in the chair. He had a scent of pine, which she had asked him about before. He said it was the smell of his laundry detergent. The scent made Emily's nose tingle.
Emily, you owe me for this lifetime, don't think you can escape. You made me like this. I'll get back at you sooner or later.
Was it her fault?
Doctor, this is my medical record.
Coming back to her senses, David had already left. A patient in line waved a hand in front of her. Emily forced a smile and took the medical record. For the next few days, she was in a daze, even dreaming of David's words. Glancing at the time, she quickly got up to get ready. She was going to be late. As soon as Emily stepped into the hospital, she sensed the atmosphere was different from usual. She tried to minimize her presence. Just as she walked into the office, she was called out. A group of young nurses looked gossip-hungry.
Dr. Emily, did David have an appointment with you before?
Emily held her breath.
No.
Come on, Dr. Emily, don't deny it. It's all over Weibo. What illness does he have?
It's out? Emily trembled as she took out her phone, realizing it wasn't the right place. She looked up at the group of young nurses, her voice rising.
Didn't your teachers teach you not to disclose patient privacy?
With that, she turned and went into the room. The young nurses were stunned, and one nudged the other.
David is Dr. Emily's boyfriend. Of course, she's upset with your questions.
Hashtag David mental illness, hashtag David psychological issues, hashtag David Emily, hashtag the last time Emily saw their names together was on a school report issued by the principal. She clicked on the tag. It detailed their 2-year high school relationship, vividly painting her as a gold digger. The reason for their breakup was supposedly because David had no money. The story seemed real, but the person forgot to do their research. Back then, David couldn't wait to wear his wealth on his sleeve. Emily sat down and dialed a number skillfully. The phone rang and was about to hang up automatically when it was answered. David didn't speak, which meant he knew who she was.
David, explain this, and I'll help clear things up.
Clear up? Clear up what? Bet you kicked me to the curb?
David shouted, his emotions extremely unstable. The sound of things being smashed reached her ears, followed by others trying to stop him. Wasn't it you who suggested the breakup? The breakfast Jessica watched Emily eat this morning churned in her stomach. She hung up the phone and ran to the bathroom, emptying her stomach. The stomach acid burned her throat, and the unpleasant smell spread. She wiped away the tears forced out by the physical reaction and looked at her bloodshot eyes. Life is really tiresome. When Emily came out, David had called her countless times.
Hello.
Emily, you think I'm scary too, right? You think so too, so why don't you come and cure me? Why?
I will cure you.
Emily, 8 years ago, you used this tone to deceive me. You said you would always be with me.
Jessica came to pick me up from work again.
If it weren't for the fact that more people are criticizing him online, I'd really suspect he's taking revenge on you.
Revenge for what?
Revenge for your cold-heartedness back then, not appreciating our dear David, and just wanting to find a highly educated person.
Oh, stop it!
In the evening, Jessica was cooking in the kitchen, talking to herself.
David wasn't that bad to you back then, just a bit brainless. Those childish tricks of his were both infuriating and laughable.
That article even called you two a golden couple. Who didn't know our school beauty was talented and graceful? What kind of reputation did he have back then? I can't believe it.
Listening to her complaints, I felt much more relaxed. Jessica is my childhood friend, the person who has been with me the most in this life. When I was little and got punished, she was there with me. When I grew up and got sick, she was there too. Watching her busy back, I quietly walked into the room. I poured out a few pills and hid them in my palm. Before I could turn around, I heard the sound of a plate shattering behind me. In an instant, a chill ran up from my feet, freezing me entirely. Jessica's eyes were red, and she said nothing. She came straight for the pill bottle. I dodged and met her gaze. It was filled with disappointment. I gave up resisting. The pill bottle was snatched away.
What is this? Are these hormone pills? You're still taking hormone pills?
Her tears kept falling, and her hands shook so much she could barely hold her phone. I held her down, slowly closed my eyes, and spoke softly.
Yes, they are hormone pills.
Emily, didn't you promise me you'd take care of yourself?
Jessica suddenly remembered something and opened my drawer. I leaned weakly against the wall and sat down.
Jessica, I can't get better. I can't eat. Even a single grain of rice makes me retch for a long time. If I don't take hormone pills, I'd look like a skeleton by now. If I don't get these nutrient infusions, I might have already passed away.
I suddenly laughed.
Jessica, isn't it ironic? Before I had this eating disorder, I wanted to end it all.
A tear rolled down my cheek. I looked up at the light, imagining it as the sun in my heart. My voice was so soft it seemed to float away.
Now that I'm sick, I want to live.
Jessica couldn't hold back anymore. She threw down the syringes and came over to hug me, her voice breaking.
Why? Why? Emily, why?
I hugged her back, smiling.
The nutrient infusions were formulated by a friend of my teacher. They're very expensive. You owe me.
She burst into even louder sobs. After that day, Jessica didn't let me eat food but instead took out all my nutrient infusions and hormone pills. She bought all kinds of stickers and small bottles. She said,
Stick with me. I can't make you a Barbie princess, but I can make sure you eat like one.
Contrary to my expectations, David and my names stayed on the trending list for a week. Just when it seemed like we would be forgotten, someone would bring it up again. I hated this feeling of being watched. David hadn't responded at all, probably thinking silence would make it go away. But soon, it couldn't be ignored anymore. My Twitter, filled with academic papers, was flooded with hateful comments. The overwhelming insults came at me from all directions. Seeing my mood worsen, Jessica took away my phone. But those vile words lingered in my mind, refusing to leave. The story begins with a difficult decision.
Mom, why are we moving?
Mom silently wiped away her tears.
Because I want to take you to find a dream castle.
Emily's eyes widened, unable to hide her excitement. Then she suddenly thought of something.
Mom, Aunt just called me a bad person. Am I?
That frail figure paused. Her shoulders trembled slightly.
You're not, sweetheart, you.
Sweetheart, of course you're not. You and Jessica are both little princesses.
Mom hesitated, and Aunt Jessica moved past the topic. But in Emily's heart, it didn't pass. Time passed, and Emily was in class when the teacher said someone was looking for her. Before she could walk out, Aunt, whom she hadn't seen in a long time, stormed into the classroom and slapped her.
You little brat, why are you still bothering my husband after you all left? Why? Today I'll teach you a lesson.
Emily stood there, expressionless, not daring to look up. She was afraid to see the looks her classmates were giving her. Jessica, who was in the next class, heard the commotion and immediately ran over to protect her.
It's okay, Emily. If she hits you, I'll hit her back. I'll slap her.
Jessica meant what she said. That aunt was no match for the martial arts-trained Jessica. They left again, this time moving to H City. Aunt Jessica used her savings to buy a house in the northern suburbs. Emily thought she could gradually forget those past events, but unfortunately, she didn't, and her mom even passed away there. Emily looked up at the drifting snowflakes, listening to Mom's gentle voice as always.
Emily, Mom is free now. Mom loves you.
She wore the white chiffon dress Emily often saw her in when she was young, beautiful and pure. Emily hadn't seen her like this in a long time. Stepping onto the edge of the rooftop, Emily opened her mouth wide but couldn't say a word. Her mom was like a butterfly in winter, dancing despite everything. Gently falling. She seemed like heaven's favorite, with her beloved plum blossoms blooming even in the snow. Suddenly, Emily woke up. She sat up abruptly, gasping for air. Jessica insisted on sleeping with her that night, but now she was nowhere to be seen. Emily tiptoed out of bed.
I want to ask about treating anorexia.
Emily opened the door a crack. Jessica stood in the kitchen, the farthest place from the bedroom, looking worried. The window was open, and she had a cigarette between her fingers.
Is there a way without seeing a psychologist? No, you misunderstood. It's not about the money, but some special circumstances prevent us from seeing a psychologist.
Then her expression turned desolate.
Okay, thank you.
Emily went back to bed, pretending to be asleep. Jessica still had the lingering smell of smoke on her.
Awake? Do you want grape or pineapple juice today?
Emily looked at the food she made.
Just some lettuce, please.
Jessica froze, somewhat disbelieving.
It's okay, don't force yourself. Eating and then throwing up is so uncomfortable.
I want to get better.
Jessica lowered her head, and after a long while, she responded. After that, Emily's phone was returned to her. She deliberately avoided those negative comments. Suddenly, a new notification appeared. David, anyone who insults her, I'll insult back. Get lost. Crash. The phone fell to the ground. The shattered screen reflected Emily's surprised expression. The doorbell rang outside. Jessica went to answer it. Emily had a gut feeling. She opened the door. It was him. David had dark circles under his eyes, unable to hide his exhaustion. He grabbed Jessica and pushed her out, then closed the door. Their eyes met, and Emily couldn't understand the complexity in his gaze.
Emily, can you hug me?
And so, the story continues. As Emily tried to finish her sentence, David strode over and grabbed her shoulders.
Emily, I'm begging you, now that you're back, don't leave me.
David's near-desperate state made Emily feel like they were kindred spirits. His eyes were bloodshot, filled with pleading. This scene deeply pained her. The reckless boy had been destroyed by her own hands. Without responding, she gently embraced him.
Don't leave me again, I can't live without you, I really can't.
He held her waist tightly, as if trying to meld her into him.
I'm not a good person, but I love you.
This sentence, it sounded familiar. Later, at school, Emily was called by her homeroom teacher.
Emily, come here for a moment.
Glancing at the time, Emily knew David should already be waiting for her at the school gate.
Coming, teacher.
The homeroom teacher adjusted his glasses, looking stern.
Emily, you're the top student in your grade. You shouldn't let yourself fall.
Teacher, David will change. He's a good kid.
The homeroom teacher's disappointed look left Emily at a loss.
Emily, calling you a once-in-a-century genius isn't an exaggeration. You carry all our hopes. It's been 30 years since our school produced a top scorer. We're all waiting for you to bring us good news. Moreover, are you willing to give up your studies for him? Do you really know what kind of person you want to be with?
Suddenly, many images flashed through Emily's mind.
Emily, I bought beef buns. Emily, don't be afraid, I'll carry you home.
His back wasn't broad, but it felt like a mountain to her.
Emily, if you keep messing around, I'll kiss you.
David's eyes had a glint of desire and a hint of fierceness.
Emily, I want to marry you.
They stood in the rain, Emily held the umbrella, and he rolled up her pants, looking serious. Emily chuckled softly.
Teacher, you're right. I want to find a good person. But David is the best person in the world.
Feeling it was too cheesy, Emily shyly smiled. Ignoring the homeroom teacher calling after her, she dashed downstairs. She wanted to see David, right now. At the school gate, David wore a cold expression. Emily hadn't noticed yet.
David, the teacher talked to me today. He asked what kind of person I want to be with in the future, and I said,
You said a good person.
The boy beside her interrupted, his school uniform casually draped over his shoulder, looking cold. Though it felt strange, Emily nodded.
Yes, how did you know?
David suddenly smiled, but he was clearly angry. Emily was about to speak when he suddenly leaned down and kissed her. It wasn't his usual gentle kiss, today he was fierce. Seeing the passers-by, Emily struggled desperately. Suddenly, a metallic taste filled her mouth. He let go of her, burying his head in the crook of her neck.
I'm not a good person, but I love you.
That day, I pushed David away, and he never appeared again.
You vile woman. Go to hell.
A rotten egg smashed at my feet. My high heels were splattered with egg yolk. I looked towards the source of the voice and saw a group of young girls approaching aggressively. They threw everything from their baskets at me.
What have I done to them?
I dodged awkwardly but fell to the ground. The sound of camera shutters accompanied the curses.
So filthy. What does my brother see in her? Look at her sitting on the ground. Doesn't she look like a dog? Take more pictures. Capture her looking like she's wandering in a garbage dump.
I was utterly shocked. I carefully examined the girls' faces. Had I offended them?
Why are they doing this to me?
Watching their rampant laughter, I was expressionless, no longer struggling. Eggs hit my head, and yolk slid down my face. Something got into my eyes, causing unbearable irritation.
Ha ha ha, look, she's crying. How dare she cry?
She laughed, and I laughed too. It seemed that every step I took on the edge of a knife was easily smoothed over by others. Before I fainted, I saw a figure. I hoped it was David coming to save me, but unfortunately, it wasn't. It was my junior. I woke up at home. Jessica's eyes were red as she silently brought me a bowl of porridge.
Jessica, what happened?
Don't worry, I brought you straight home without letting anyone examine you. I even fought with your junior for it.
Then she looked gossipy.
By the way, that junior of yours is quite loyal. His face got scratched up by those crazy women, but he didn't let go of you.
Where's my phone?
Jessica's expression changed instantly.
Your phone broke and was sent for repair. You'll have it back in a couple of days.
I felt a flash of doubt, but then heard a knock at the door. Then, the room door was knocked on as well. I looked at Jessica, wanting an explanation. But she looked flustered and just called out for the person to come in. Then she left. It was my junior, and Jessica was right, his face was indeed scratched up. I pressed my lips together and smiled at him.
Thank you, Michael.
No. No problem. Senior, I couldn't let you get bullied.
Realizing something was off, I stopped talking. Michael looked frustrated.
Senior, I didn't mean it that way. You helped me with my thesis, and I'm very grateful.
The face in front of me, covered in scratches, suddenly looked different.
Are you the one who grabbed my clothes at the school gate?
I didn't blame myself for not recognizing him. After all, he was as thin as a stick back then. Michael nodded happily.
Yes, Senior, you finally remember me.
Michael and I talked about the hardships of pursuing a PhD, while outside the room, a heated argument was taking place. Jessica looked at David with hatred.
What are you doing here? This is my house.
Jessica, get that guy out here.
She burst out laughing.
David, get lost. You almost ruined Emily back then. Why are you bothering her again now?
I ruined her. What did I do wrong?
Yes, exactly that expression. What did I do? What do you want? Emily, stop bothering me. Isn't that what you said?
David didn't respond, and Jessica's face was full of mockery.
Half a month before you two broke up, Emily's mom passed away. And what were you doing then? You were angry because you believed from the bottom of your heart that the good person she mentioned wasn't you.
David wanted to argue but couldn't find the words.
You only took out your anger on Emily. What else did you do? Find other women? Go clubbing?
I didn't. That.
Jessica interrupted him, staring straight into his eyes. In an instant, David felt all his despicable thoughts were exposed.
Emily's mom had smiling depression. Unfortunately, Emily's condition was even more severe. We raised her like a flower, took her to find the sun, but her mom couldn't hold on, and Emily's depression relapsed, becoming even more serious. And what were you doing then? You were venting your anger because of a misunderstanding, pushing her into the abyss again and again. Were you proud of being good to her? Wasn't that what you promised her on one knee?
Jessica's voice grew louder as she spoke, tears streaming down her face, staring at David until she saw his pain.
David, you will never have Emily back in this lifetime. You successfully became a thorn in her heart, one that hurts at the slightest touch.
David's face turned pale, his eyes filled with regret, and Jessica's sneer was satisfied. The door opened from the inside. Michael was no longer the obedient boy. Leaning against the door, he lifted his eyelids.
Go in, Senior is calling you.
Jessica wasn't surprised, snorted coldly, and David stumbled inside. The bedroom door was open. I could easily see David's appearance.
Emily.
I responded indifferently. Jessica's voice was too loud, I didn't eavesdrop on purpose. But she was right about one thing. David was indeed a thorn in my heart, one that had grown into my flesh, impossible to remove or integrate.
Emily, I didn't know. I really didn't know. Please believe me.
I felt a pang of bitterness but didn't respond. David seemed afraid of something, talking nonstop.
I was wrong, Emily. You can punish me however you want.
Don't you want to apologize to me?
David recoiled as if burned, letting go of my hand, stammering.
I am apologizing, Emily.
I grabbed his retreating hand, my gaze gentle, smiling without any hostility. Don't be afraid. I don't blame you, David. I'm sorry I ruined you.
My voice was light, without any weight, but I believed it was a mountain in David's heart. He finally broke down, crying like a child. He clung to my bedside, tightly holding my hand.
I was wrong, Emily. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have deliberately involved you with those marketing accounts. I didn't expect those crazy people to treat you like that.
No, David, you knew what they would do, but you didn't care because you wanted what you wanted, and no one else knew.
I sighed softly, letting him hold my hand. I took out an old phone from the drawer. David recognized it, his pupils shrinking, trying to grab it.
Emily, don't!
I avoided him and unlocked the screen. The wallpaper was of us at 18, smiling brightly, the sun merely a backdrop. I opened the chat history, revisiting it with him, bit by bit. Finally, I deleted everything with one click. I used to look at these things often, but David didn't. Clearly, he couldn't handle it. I formatted the phone and threw it in the trash. David sat on the floor, his eyes empty.
David, did I really cause this illness?
I didn't want to hear his answer. Because I already knew. David, regarding the previous marketing account content, it was all orchestrated by me. Please stop hurting Emily. I am permanently leaving the circle. At the dining table, I looked at this abrupt message, lowering my eyes. Jessica and Michael exchanged glances. Neither spoke. After dinner, Michael and I went to work together. As soon as we arrived at the hospital, the dean called me to his office.
Dean.
The person in the chair nodded, gesturing for me to come over.
Emily, I'm sorry, but we can't continue our collaboration. Because of Mr. Song, our hospital's rating has dropped, and the complaints are endless.
The point was made. I remained calm. I took out my resignation letter, written that morning, from my bag.
Thank you for your appreciation, Dean.
He sighed softly, saying no more. I left through the back door. Michael's intentions were clear. But I didn't want to. Jessica had arrived early, leaning against the car, looking relaxed. She took my bag and threw it in the back seat.
Get in, princess!
Idiot! Just as silly as when we were kids. I thought to myself, but my body didn't hesitate. Feeling the wind from the speeding car, it was as if all my shackles were blown away, watching the world turn upside down, still full of charm. The next destination, unknown. In the car, Jessica didn't play music but listened quietly as I spoke.
How did you know the marketing account was David's doing?
I know him too well. He's David. He stopped loving me long ago, but he couldn't accept that I was the one who left first.
Jessica's expression was indescribable.
What about you?
I don't know. Maybe he was once my lifeline, so I didn't want to let go either.
Jessica looked at my expression, silently connecting to Bluetooth, the music drowning out my voice.
It's definitely not love anymore.
Under my insistence, the supposedly broken phone was taken out of Jessica's bag. I instinctively opened Weibo. The trending topics were no longer about me, an unknown person. The photos of me being pelted with eggs were still circulating online. But most people were now apologizing to me. I found it both amusing and ridiculous. If the consequence of wantonly hurting others was just a light apology, then it didn't matter. But what if it were a death sentence? The human heart is the dirtiest. No one expected Jessica and I to leave. A few days later, we received a call from a neighbor. Michael and David had a fight. At the doorstep. When we got the news, we were experiencing shepherding on the grasslands. After hanging up, Jessica complained.
Emily, do you think they're crazy? Why fight at our doorstep? It's so embarrassing.
The neighbors don't know me anyway, so it doesn't matter where they fight.
Jessica's eyes widened, and she playfully ran towards me.
Oh, Emily, you've got guts now.
I showed the same bright smile as when I was 18. Reckless, carefree. Running while looking back, Jessica was panting but didn't give up. I turned around, facing her.
Are you stupid? You can't even outrun me, and you say you learned martial arts.
Jessica paused, then quickly caught up with me.
I was just letting you win.
The next second, I wished time would stop at that moment forever.
Senior!
Emily!
Jessica almost fell, and I caught her. She looked at me in horror.
Emily, I didn't leak a word.
Next, a strange scene appeared on the narrow country road. A pink RV in the front, followed by two supercars. I watched their position through the rearview mirror, while Jessica studied the map, muttering non-stop.
I used to support Junior, but now I can't stand him. Anyone who disrupts our trip deserves to be ruthlessly eliminated.
In a hotel in the neighboring city, the two of them were arguing endlessly. I was peeling sunflower seeds for Jessica, watching the show. Sometimes they made me laugh.
Senior, I took care of you during school.
You call her senior. Are you better than her?
Mr. Song, I was the student council president, and you don't understand senior at all. She is.
I listened intently, but suddenly the nausea and vomiting returned. I covered my mouth, attracting everyone's attention. Jessica looked nervous, with fear in her eyes. When I was 15, she had seen it a few times. Back then, it was much scarier than now. I ran to the bathroom. As soon as I reached the sink, I couldn't hold it in. Bending over in pain, my hands supported on the side. It felt like scissors were violently torturing my stomach. I couldn't control the vomiting. When I opened my eyes again, even though the tears from vomiting blurred my vision, I could still see the red in front of me. It was blood. I had vomited blood. My fingers went numb, and I clenched my fist. Smiling, I turned to comfort Jessica. Her eyes were red, teeth clenched. She was trembling uncontrollably. I took a step forward.
It's okay, maybe it's just a heat issue.
Jessica forced a smile, just about to nod, when her eyes widened, reaching out to me. I wanted to respond to her, but it seemed impossible. Blood uncontrollably flowed out of my body, my mouth merely a passage for it to enter the world. Blood dripped onto the white tiles, just like the snowy ground the year Mom left. I wondered, is this fate? Was my life never meant to exist from the beginning? I didn't know.
David, can you leave? Senior definitely doesn't want to see you.
I'm not leaving. Who are you? At least I'm her ex-boyfriend.
Enough! Both of you shut up! If you disturb Emily, you'll regret it.
This is a hospital. Seeing me open my eyes, Jessica looked concerned. It was clear she hadn't rested well, and I felt a mix of emotions.
Emily, it's okay. It's just a minor stomach issue. Don't be afraid.
It's stomach cancer, I know.
These words shocked the three of them. Their eyes all fell on me. I gently closed my eyes. Someone who hasn't eaten properly for 8 years is already an empty shell inside. Someone held my hand. It was Jessica.
Emily, I'll treat you. It will be tough, but you must get better.
I can find a very authoritative doctor for you, Senior. Don't give up.
Slowly opening my eyes, I looked at the birds outside the window, feeling the autumn wind, directing the children behind me. The afterglow of the sunset shone on them.
Jessica, I miss Mom.
This was the first time Jessica disagreed with me. She forcefully kept me in the hospital for treatment. But I knew my illness best. Michael and David also stayed. Sometimes the 4 of us played cards. Autumn arrived. Jessica gave up because the doctor said chemotherapy was too painful. She wanted me to face pain only once in my life, by my own choice. I didn't leave the hospital. Jessica and I had already been to the places we wanted to go. Staying in the hospital was fine. If I died, they could handle the cremation. But I didn't expect the old machine to keep running for so long. I lived in the hospital for half a year. Spring. Unlike all the vibrant living things, I had become emaciated. The doctor stopped the hormone medication. She said it was too harmful to my body. I wasn't afraid, but looking into Jessica's eyes, I couldn't say that. Michael also quit his job, and the 3 of them stayed with me. Actually, having Jessica was enough. One day, I leaned against the window, wanting to see outside. I suddenly noticed that the trees were budding. Jessica pushed me, walking in the corridor. I didn't want to go outside.
Emily, I bought you many dresses online. Only your perfect figure can wear XXXXS.
I smiled faintly, with a hint of longing in my eyes. Watching the children playing downstairs, my eyes were filled with envy. Time returned to when I was 18. I survived against all odds. Living up to expectations, I became the top scorer that year. I even received an anonymous donation to study abroad. When filling out the application, Jessica looked serious.
Where do you want to go?
Stanford, to study psychology.
Seeing her surprised expression.
A healer cannot heal themselves, but I want to try.
Coming back to the present, Michael was calling me. He bought me a necklace. It was a sun.
Senior, you are my son.
I didn't respond.